So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining. This is going to be our last session of the day, and I think it's a very poignant topic and relevant. So, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jose Ramirez-Marquez from Stevens. He's actually going to be going over the results of the COVID-19 survey that they did. So, it's impacts of COVID-19 related to work at home, policies on system engineers, and the general population, which I think we all are very curious to know. So, Jose, when you're ready, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Just one thing, I cannot see anyone. I just see my slides. And so I will assume that you are interested. I hope that at the end of this presentation, you guys can stay here and I will answer as many questions as I can. I have prepared this for around a 25-minute um, presentation, and then I'll stop and take any questions that are out there. So let me jump right in. So as you see, the title of this presentation is called Impacts of COVID-Related Work at Home Policies on Systems Engineering and the General Population. Back in May, I was invited to do this work, and this is also the work of a couple of PhD students that um, obviously I am presenting, but one is Puria Vabde, and the other one is Maria Jose Perez Pereda. And most of the work was done by them and advised by me and Denish Verma and Cara Pepe. So again, back in May, I got into this work, and the idea was to understand um, um, the results of this INSERC and INCOSI survey that wanted to measure or look at the impact of how was the community being affected by these work at home policies. And so in my in my in my lab, I do a lot of work related to community resilience, and what we thought was that we could not only look at the survey, but then look and see how that response related with the general population. And this is the work that I will be presented. And so what you will see in general is an introduction of what the survey was about, and then I'll dive in directly into the methods related to the survey, and the social media approach that we implemented in two ways, both Twitter and Reddit. And then I'll talk about the analysis. So as I mentioned, through CERC, the survey, the idea was to understand the impact of COVID on systems engineering community, and understand these effects on these new work at home arrangements, and then use social media to compare, leverage, and contrast, if possible, the community behavior against other and general population. And so the survey was a digital survey, and it was um, distributed in early June, and to over 10,000 participants, and about 600 participants provided a full and or 80% provided an answer, a complete answer of this survey. Um, the questions were the first were divided into two types of questions that we have defined. So multiple choice, and a second set of questions that are open answer. And what we did for open answer, we actually tried to apply some text mining techniques. Not We actually applied some text mining techniques, in specific the LDA algorithm, and we did that to replicate what we would do later with social media. Um, there were multiple options for primary affiliation of the participants, but we decided to look at the two bigger groups that were identified, both academia and government industry. And so what you're going to start seeing for the next couple of slides is the responses and the results associated to the um, multiple choice questions. And so the first set of visuals that you see here are, first of all, the primary affiliation of participants. This relates very much to the type of responses that we got, right? Given that INCOSI and CERC are highly attended by industry and government. And so what turns out is that the distribution for this first set of questions was very similar in general throughout the multiple choice questions. The responses are the distribution is quite similar. So you can see here that the first set of question was trying to understand how pervasive was remote work prior to COVID. And you can see that at least more than 50% had some previous understanding of working remotely. And then related to that, so how were how the projects have transitioned given these remote work. And you can see also here that some of what's important is that more than 50% of the responders have found that there's been a high impact in these transitions. In other words, the team projects have suffered, have been highly impacted by this remote work. It's important that in academia we understand that, or we think that the responses are mainly related to research because of the wording of team projects. And so it's not entirely related to the transitioning of teaching or how the environment around a classroom has changed. We followed that questions regarding negative effects. And so what you're seeing here is two sets of questions that how this remote work has negatively impacted internal communication and the situation on your project, right? And so again, 50 or more percent of almost 50% of the population at both levels have some impact and still adjusting into this communication. And so we'll get into communication a little bit later when I talk about the open-ended questions. But it's important to see that there's a big, significant cohort of the populations that are having some problems related to work project situation and internal communication. So in academia, this can be related, again, with research projects. If it's researchers, there's maybe some issues among the researchers with the students in terms of internal communication, and same and within industry and government, it might be related to teamwork. Again, the next set of questions is related to changes. And so we also wanted to see how the participants have experience of supervision and leadership and management changes. So again, fairly similar distribution between academia and industry government. And again, a lot of impact, a high percentage of impact. One can say, well, there's at least 50% that are well already feeling a small impact. But here the important thing is, I think there's a significant change in how supervision and leadership is being regarded. And again, many of these questions and answers will relate more when I get into the slides related to open-ended questions. Okay, The next part relates to trying to understand what are the challenges uh, related to working at home, accessibility of information, and different ways to participate or actually work remotely, right? And so what you can see here, and oh, sorry for the colors here, there's a little bit of a typo, so this should be gray. We can see that here the top uh, challenges are similarly shared by academia and industry. These are mostly population based, distraction at home, and more difficult to coordinate meetings. But there's a significant difference between the two cohorts in the type of information that it's necessary to be accessible. This is probably due to the essence of systems engineering, for example, working in the defense industry. So accessing restricted information is generally not something that happens in academia, but surely happens at industry and government. So um, we we think that that's something that might be necessary to be worked on. Um, and then the other section is related really mostly about how you set up remotely to work. And so most of the responders in both academia and government mention or feel that there has been a good collaboration and a good way to work remotely. Um, and but something interesting is that there's concern about having resources in order to set an office, so monitor, printer, paper, so typical office needs, or that would be obvious when in an office setting. Um, and then the other ones related to that, a follow-up question on accessibility to documents and software and expectations. And so what obviously we wanted to look at how these, if there were things being correlated with the challenges that were shown, or the responses related to the challenges facing from home. And what you're seeing here is that correlation matrix. I'm going to have to advance a little bit faster, or otherwise I won't have enough time to get into the next section. We continued with looking at what tools are used, and it's quite similar both for industry and government, industry and academia. Maybe a little bit of difference is that industry and government use more Microsoft-oriented tools. This is not something new, and in academia, Zoom is the preferred way to actually collaborate. So based on that optional responses, then we went into looking at the testimonial answers. And what we did, we divided these questions into positive oriented questions. And you can read them here. What aspects got better, and what is better now from management. So this is related to those leadership questions that I was discussing a couple of minutes ago. And then we have also neutral oriented questions related to what has changed, and what aspects of leadership are better now. And then negatively oriented, so how your projects have suffered, how management is different, and what other issues and long-term impacts have you had. So the first thing that we wanted to do is do a sentiment analysis regarding these questions. Why? Well, because we wanted to see if the sentiment related to the question. So In terms of the answers, we expect that most of the questions are in a neutral response, right? And so if you have positive questions that have a negative sentiment, that's generally not good. If you have negative questions with a positive sentiment, then that doesn't lead to good uh, descriptions, right? And so since we didn't want this to do this just based on our human-based understanding of reviewing all of the um, responses, what we did was we actually implemented um, a natural language processing technique that allows us to identify different topics related to um, text. And so we chose LDA. There's a ton of different algorithms to actually extract topics. We decided to go with LDA just because of the type of data that we have. What LDA does is it extracts a set of words in a vector format, and for each word it assigns with a given probability belonging to a given clusters. The clusters are predefined, and so you have to be working on or experimenting on that. So um, that's a very brief description of the LDA algorithm. You want to have a little bit more understanding, I'll be happy to share the paper and some good references regarding that. So basically, of what you do. At the end, what we're interested is in this section that describes the data, the words that are related to each and cluster. We decided to use assign um, words to clusters depending on uh, the highest probability of belonging, and and there are many other ways to assign it, but that's what we did. And so what you get is something like this. And so for cluster one, this is survey testimonial answer, positive questions. Remember, let me go quickly back to remind you of these positive oriented questions. So what aspects got better and what's better now from management? And so what you're seeing, this is cluster one that we get. It's a work-life balance. How are we getting these topics? So we implement the algorithm, we extract the words. This is the set of words. Then we go back and look at, okay, so where are these words being um, extracted from? And based on that, we create this cluster. So it's a little bit of human computer interaction, so that there's not some, but there's coherence to the different clusters. And so cluster one is related to work-life balance. And what you can see is that here's these three top uh, um, items that we can gauge from this cluster. So work-life balance has improved, it's easier to focus, and better productivity. So remember, this one was about the positive questions and what has been better. Um, and then cluster two, time waste, right? So related, but not entirely the same. We can work with less distraction, reduce time waste, reduce time commute, and fewer unnecessary meetings. We'll see some contradiction later with this meeting um, case. Um, and then we extracted one more cluster about teamwork. That there's also this contrast in some cases. You'll see that later. Better communication, and these new communication and collaborative tools have been actually pretty good, and actually we all can attest to that. And team daily meetings. Um, Regarding the neutral questions, we got another set of two clusters. Um, related to management changes and communication changes. So again, identification of changes in team meetings and people or managers being laid off. This is something that was discussed. And then how has communication changed? Well, obviously less face-to-face meetings. So, but they talk about there's a need of better leadership skills. This will come immediately after in the negative questions, and there seems to be a lot of email also. So, and then remember before they were very happy or in the positive questions that there was very management of meetings. Well, we can see that there's some concern about being having less interaction. There's social isolation. Um, People actually like to be together in the office and have really human to human interaction. And one thing that's probably very important is this canceled work travel. So people don't like to get to stay in one place only. They want to travel and for work. Um, some other issues related to collaborations, related to matching schedules. So you have to work a lot with actually scheduling the meetings. Um, and then, as we saw before, accessing restricted information, it's quite an issue. And then there's some concerns related to uh, obviously how to uh, redo this personal contact out of the office and in a cyber collaboration environment. There's then there's one more cluster that we extracted from the negative questions, and we called it economic impact. So change in business and recruiting flow, and then they talked about impact of overall economy. Um, so in by the way, out of this work, we actually wrote a paper. It's currently under review on systems engineering. So if you want um, uh, a description, a written description, just send me an email and I'll be happy to share the paper under review. So basically, this is the table that we obtained from the answers to the testimonial questions. Um, but again, I thought that at the beginning of the study, I really wanted to see what the general population had to say and how did that compare to the systems engineering community, and if it could be used to leverage both cohorts. And so what we did, we did two approaches. One is with Twitter data, and this is the process that we're following. So we collected Twitter data since the beginning of the year and up to June, end of June. Um, what we did was we actually clustered those tweets in different categories and then extracted both sentiment and topics related um, to that data set. And so, here's the data collection step. In order for us to do that, well, we need to identify what type of information we want. And for this, we looked at these different hashtags. And so we looked at over 5 million tweets and almost a million users. And so there's this added intricacy that we also included the reply. So for every tweet that we get that has this hashtag, we look at the tweet per se and then how it has been shared or retweeted so that we can extract information. Once we do that, then we apply a deep learning algorithm that allows us to identify different clusters to as related to the survey. So, and those clusters were titled work from home communication tools. No, so pretty good that we got that, because that's something that was relevant with the systems engineering community. Cloud services, well, not really that related. Remote team collaboration, work from home experience, physical and emotional health, academia, and improving life environment. And so there were other clusters, but we really didn't feel they were really related. So, for example, your offers, news, motivation, a lot of tips on how to engage in a job offer, for example. And so, what you'll see right now, it's what the clusters that we created. And so, what you're seeing here, the ones that are in blue are not related to um, the SE community based on our survey, and the ones that are in kind of yellow or brownish, light brown, those are related. And so you get communication tools, improving life environment. From there, what we did was we actually used again sentiment analysis, and from there we actually created the most recurrent uh, phrases. And so here's sentiment analysis related to those different um, clusters that you saw, and specific um, wording that we get. And so you can see here, pretty evident. If you've been working on Zoom all the time, there's a lot of concern about Zoom fatigue. There's a lot of concern about self isolation and so lack of social interaction. A lot of screen time is being talked about. So these are all negative. And as you start going up, obviously you get, by the way, Zoom calls, right? They're very, very good, right? Or video conference or home office. That's not related to Zoom fatigue, right? So Zoom fatigue is related to having to do this over and over. Uh, and interesting enough is that all of these um, cyber home workspaces are pretty well regarded. And then on top of the on top of the table is this flexible work and collaboration tools, life balance, right? And so this is something that might be interesting for both companies at the industry and government level, and also for academia. This flexible work, um, we should look into that, making sure that there's no social isolation. So um, again, a mix of in the future, maybe a mix of flexibility and then coming into the office might work very good. So just as we did before, we created these negative aspects and positive aspects, and exactly trying to come up with these labels related to what we got from our social media data. And so one is isolation. So the only so this one is interesting. So here are some examples of what they're saying. um, I'm all for the remote work, so I could not come up with more than one just isolation. And so these two relate to this labeling, or this first cluster relates to cluster 6 in the um, CERC survey, right? So less interaction, less social activities. Again, there's concern about the distraction at home in the general population, and tech issues come out as problem. We call them tech issues, but they might be or it can be issues or concerns or challenges, right? So if you're in Zoom all the time, then you get constantly soup fatigue, and the problem can be that you get too many meetings, right? Um, and so people actually complaining on how other people use this work environment, right? So some of the office um, issues are being transported into the cyber case. So positive access, again, flexibility seems again on top of the list. So this is something that we might want to better understand. Um, People don't like to commute. Remote work generally works. So maybe later a work-life balance, once we're out of the pandemic and out of COVID, um, would be better. Um, and then related also to that is this commute and deep work. So people seem to be much more focused and easier to concentrate into into the work they're doing, and so less distractions. This is related to clusters too, and fewer unnecessary meetings. And so with that, I will that those are the three approaches that we did. And with that, I will stop my presentation and shift to the open questions now, if there are any.
So, Jose, thank you so much. And there
Yeah,
are actually some questions.
excellent.
So, one of the questions is, was there any insight from your survey on how systems engineers thought working from home would impact their career growth?
No, we didn't do. That was not part of the questionnaire, but it's an interesting. So I can tell you that no at the CERC survey, but in fact in the population, once we looked at social media, there's a lot of concern into that in both career advancement and career start. So there's a lot of um, tips on that. So imagine this is so all new hires were done by Zoom, right? And so um, makes quite a difference. So there are a lot of comments on that, on how to prepare even for the start of the career, and then towards to moving towards career advancement.
Okay.
I mean that's that. So the answer is no, we didn't. But here's an example of why we tried to use social media to see what we could leverage.
That you could find, and that's how you
Now,
augment
very
it.
important one point that I want to make. So this is really the start the responses of the to the survey I related to the start of the pandemic. So everything was new. Again, working with technology at home and being at home during the first 3 months, we think it's very different to what has happened now that you are um, there's some limitations to that. So it would be interesting to see what has how those answers have changed.
Mm. I guess before I go into any of the other questions, is there any plans in the works to do a follow-up on the respondents to see if there's been any changes?
So we're still on social media. We have the data. Um, we're we're in the works. Let's say.
Okay. So these questions all come from Beth Wilson. Here's another one though. Do you think that the workplace in general will change its attitude towards calling in sick? I remember people thinking it was heroic to come into the workplace when they were sick, and she does hope that that changes.
Well, I don't. So what I know is that people prefer to be working. Um, what it seems like is that people really like the flexibility of working remotely. Now, can you work sick remotely? Well, that depends. You can do depending on what kind of sickness you have, right? And so if you call in sick for just a cold, now maybe you can just do um, work from home and do some of the work. I mean, it's difficult to answer that question, right? And so I would say,
No, especially if there's no really like a direct. There is another question over here too, once again from Beth. Um, I didn't see any mention of having kids at home. Did that come up and I missed it? I know that many parents struggle to work at home while also supporting the kids trying to adapt to remote learning.
so yes, there was a lot of discussion about distractions at home. Not we does the survey doesn't specifically talk about children, but obviously in social media there was this mention about balancing both family and um, and work.
Okay. So I've actually got a question too, and this kind of relates more to the sampling than anything else. Right now, you've got a sample, a fairly large sample, but is that sample, when you went out and sent out the survey, were there specific targets to actually be representative of a certain population, or it was just more of a blanket to
So
anybody
the
related to cozy kind
now
of
the
thing?
survey was so the target population was all the systems engineering community encompassed by INCOSI and CERC, and
Okay.
so um, that was the target population. So usually these cyber or email-based surveys, although you can reach a lot of people, it's difficult to generally get a lot of answers. And you can see there's 600 respondents out of 10,000, right? But
Yeah, there's quite a
and
drop
so
off.
based on that, so it's a good number of responses so that we can analyze the um, um, both the multiple open the open questions and the multiple answers. But we thought that we wanted to see, well, we can get more data, right? And so
Mhm.
on the at least on the open answer. So um, that's why we did it.
No, and I think it's good, and I think it's actually important because it does give an insight into the impact of COVID on to systems. People working in systems. Um,
So for example, the general population, we don't see this issue of actually having to look at the access of information because it's classified, right? That
mhm.
didn't turn out like a big deal, but it turns out a big deal in the systems engineering community.
Yes. We have another question as well. Do you
Sure.
have a way to differentiate between the improvements due to familiarity with WFH, the work from home, and technologies versus the long-term negative effects? As the initial issues get solved, the long-term effects come up. How would you approach it?
Oh, I lost track of that. Can
Oh,
you can you can you read it again?
sure, of course I can. Do you have any way of differentiating between the improvements due to familiarity with work from home and technologies versus the long-term negative effects?
No, I don't. I don't have any way to measure that right now. I know there's that. So it's clear that there's some benefits on working from home, and there's some also positives in working from the office. So um, as you can see, so some of the benefits that are clear both at the SE community and the general population are less commute time. This is something that it's super relevant in both cases, and by doing that, you could significantly change um, the behavior even of cities, right? Um, and then the second one is people like to be at least in a different environment some of the time, right? Where they can schedule their workday however they want.
And with that, I think we're going to have to end it. Jose, thank you so much for taking the time to do that presentation. It garnered a lot of questions, but I think more than anything else, it gave insight. Did it give a total picture? But it's a start to give some insight and some valuable data.
Fantastic. Again, let me reiterate that if you want a copy of the um, research paper that it's currently under review, just shoot me an email. You have my information somewhere in the program, and I'll be happy to share a copy.
And to those of you too, you can actually connect with him through the application. The application will be available, I believe, until the 24th, if I recall correctly. So if you don't get to it today, you can connect with him, or you can even find him on Stevens's directory. So take care, everybody. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. Oh, anytime. Oh, here's to Antonio Pugliese. I saw that. Okay, well,
That's
anyway.
who asked the last question.
Okay. See you, everyone.